And I want to assure you, as the MP for that area and as a servant, having worked alongside the people of Kiharu and together, all our public primary schools, in all the classes the learners attend, they are in appearance just as the academies that the children of those who have more means attend. And actually all our public primary schools are tiled, all of them, all classes. Budget is not the one we read. This is the hard truth. The budget of Kenya is called Exchequer. The budget is not the one we read. The one we read remains there. When you have a country where there is a discrepancy between what you budget for and how much you can raise as revenue. So what we budget for is not the budget. What you fund is the budget. That the accolades given to President Mwai Kibaki, he actually deserves more. Because now we have comparisons to do. You know, when it was just President Kibaki's reign, there was no comparative analysis to do. Now we left in 2013. We can now do comparative analysis from then. And clearly you can see Kenya has never had a more prudent president than President Mwai Kibaki. Therefore, that money is going into recurrent. Then you ask yourself, this money that is going into recurrent in sectors that are by law, not as transparent as others, then you need to make your deduction around there. And I'm speaking that because I know I'm talking to experts. You scrutinize. So when the money is going here, if it's, for example, buying equipment that are security related, fine. Which are they?
ETV Africa News at this hour.
When I came and people were settling, and my brother who just spoke about health finance just came in, and the moderator pointed that the experts were on that table. So I then think that since our table was just the neighbor of the experts, then we are not so badly off. But I'm very pleased again to be here this morning. I will say a few things not very structured, like the good presentations that we had, because I want to, as Dirago pointed, to just do a reflection. Because as you are aware, I have been serving in the budget making process at the chairmanship of it. And therefore, there are many things that I have seen and learned. And those are the reflections that I want to share. But you allow me, IPF, to maybe point some semantics. Because some of us politicians, or in our career, semantics are as important as the embodiment of it. Maybe next time, instead of calling it shadow, we call it alternative. Because in politics, words matter a lot. Because to a large extent, we do a lot of talking also. As you could have also noted, when Dr. Jaramba answered the question that was asked around death, the heavy claps came from our table, because I had to visibly clap, and he had to see that I'm clapping, because he's my supervisor in the masters I'm taking in KU. So I hope the people taking the videos took me clapping vigorously. Probably that may help at some point. Thank you very much, Dr. Jaramba. He's been very instrumental in what I'm doing in KU. And as I said earlier, and I'm saying it because I see a lot of economists here, when we came in after elections, I thought that in the capacity which I was serving, that I needed to also entrench myself in terms of knowledge. And therefore, in the September of the ensuing year, which was 2023, I was very eager to start my master's. But because I had done my undergrad in KU, I thought the CV should read another institution. So I went and applied to the University of Nairobi. But because I was very eager, they delayed. When Nairobi UON starts their semester, it is 1.5 months before or after KU. And because I was very eager, I didn't want to waste any more minute. I applied in KU also because KU was coming pretty earlier, around August, September. So I enrolled in KU. But also, the time for UON also came after 1.5 months after that. So I enrolled in both master's degrees. One in public policy, the other one in pure economics in UON. And I'm glad that I'm actually done with my coursework. We are now doing the both projects concurrently. And I want to assure you I actually attended classes. And I'm not saying this because of myself. I'm saying it because I have realized as Kenyans, and especially those who have the privilege of serving Kenyans in public offices, to make optimal decisions, we need as much knowledge embedded in us as possible. Because you can rely on experts, you can rely on advisors, but they can only advise you on something you have familiarity on. And that is the reason why I am saying it, not in terms of boasting, but in terms of also encouraging any other public officer and also other young Kenyans that education, ukisoma haipotei, inasaidia pahali. As I start here, I start in terms of budget, but also as a leader. Because I'm privileged to be MP for Kiharu. And you'll keep forgiving me because, you know, that is my primary role as the Member of Parliament for Kiharu. So when you invite me many often times and I start with what we are doing in Kiharu, it's because that is exactly my job. And since we are talking about economics, an optimal allocation is in national and also in the taxonomies that exist, and especially constituencies and counties. The same semantics we are learning about here, they also happen in the constituency level. And I am glad that where I represent, that is Kiharu, our focus was primarily first in the learning institutions. It's a pretty large constituency with 2 sub-counties. We have over 112 public primary schools. That the accolades given to President Mwai Kibaki, he actually deserves more. Because now we have comparisons to do. You know, when it was just President Kibaki's reign, there was no comparative analysis to do. Now we left in 2013, we can now do comparative analysis from there. And clearly you can see, Kenya has never had a more prudent president than President Mwai Kibaki. When President Kibaki left, that figure was around or close to 1 trillion Kenya shillings. So if you look at the debt growth, the debt grew from 600 to 1.8 trillion. That's around maybe 200% over and above. But look at the revenue collection. The revenue collection, the growth was like double that of debt accumulation. And I want to say, because figures don't lie, you realize. And I want to assure you as the MP for that area and as a servant, having worked alongside the people of Kiharu and together, all our public primary schools, in all the classes the learners attend, they are in appearance just as the academies that the children of those who have more means attend. And actually all our public primary schools are tiled, all of them, all classes. We also have in the same category or sector a program we call Kiharu Masomo Bora. And Kiharu Masomo Bora touches on learning in secondary schools. And out of all our day secondary schools, over 10,000 learners. There used to be much more, but because now there was no intake in Form 1, they are now a little fewer. So they are around 10,000. They only pay 1,000 school fees per term. And in that, they eat in school from Monday to Saturday. And in the same program, we also provide learning materials like revision books. And also we have done infrastructure. Like this year alone, we are doing 10 laboratories in our JSS, which used to be primary schools institutions, modern laboratories, and much more that we are doing. So whatever we are doing here also must reflect on the leader in the area that they have dominant influence. And therefore, it is important that we speak about these things, because the same things we are talking about here affect the people. The same thing we do in the constituency level affect the same people. That is happening. And if you go to the budget of the development of that specific ministry, there is no increment that is notable. Therefore, that money is going into recurrent. Then you ask yourself, this money that is going into recurrent in sectors that are by law not as transparent as others, then you need to make your deduction around there. And I'm speaking that because I know I'm talking to experts. You scrutinize. So when the money is going here, if it's, for example, buying equipment that are security related, fine, which are they? But if it's going to recurrent, what is recurrent in that sector? And up to what length can you question that recurrent as a Kenyan? Up to what length can you question that expenditure as a journalist, for example? You'll get many answers from that. And I hope I am speaking. The other thing, budget is not the one we read. This is the hard truth. The budget of Kenya is called exchequer. The budget is not the one we read. The one we read remains there. When you have a country where there is a discrepancy between what you budget for and how much you can raise as revenue. So what you budget for is not the budget. What you fund is the budget. When you are in a household budget and you have what you want to achieve, you want to build a house in Githurai, you want to build your rural home, you want to buy a car, that is what is the budget. Then after that, those are aspirations. What can you fund out of your revenue? That is the real budget. So the things that I was seeing some semantics about absorption. That word called absorption, you need to actually juxtapose it from absorption to not funded. Those nice words about absorption and absorption, it basically means more than 95% that those programs were actually not funded by the close of the financial year. Those words around absorption, the problem is that the responsibility is left with the accounting officer, the responsibility to explain. But the overarching ministry, which is the National Treasury, then is left with no responsibility. If you sit here and you're talking about an absorption, for example, in the Department of Basic Education, like the classrooms I saw in laboratories, if there is a CFO or the PS for basic education, they seem like the ones carrying the burden, that you didn't absorb the money yet it was budgeted. That is not the truth. The truth is that that program or those projects were actually not funded. So that I have seen part of managing our country's economics is communicating things as they are, so that people's expectations are aligned to what can be delivered and are aligned to what is possible. There are just a few other things I want to highlight. One is the budget. The budget that we know in terms of the expenditure side. If you could have followed the presentation here, BPS level 4.3 trillion. Let me use the one that has been implemented, because, and you forgive me for this because I've been there. The real budget is the one that has been implemented, not the one you want not the aspirations of the next financial year. And that comes in handy at the close of the financial year, when you realize there is a lot of gap in terms of revenue. Now, let me actually use the one that has partly been implemented for this current financial year. And let me use the one before revision, before the second supplementary. You're talking about a budget of 3.8 trillion. I want you to see what it is that we budget for.